To the Point with Kelly Dunn and Michael Williams.
The holiday shopping season is underway. What can we tell about the state of the economy from the way shoppers are spending? Real estate plays a large part in our area. After another dismal year, can we expect 2012 to be better? And the unemployment rate is ending the year by falling. Is this a trend we can look forward to?
Good morning and welcome. There are so many questions about the economy, not just for those struggling through this difficult time, but also for the candidates in next year's election.
And so today we're taking on those questions. Joining us are two experts in the financial field, Sherry Olafson, an attorney specializing in real estate, and the author of Foreclosure Nation, and Greg McBride, a senior financial analyst with bankrate.com, and we thank you both for joining us. Let's start as we look at the shopping season. Greg, does it give us any sense of whether wallets are opening up? Does it give us a thumbnail on what we might be seeing in the larger economy?
Well, what it's indicative of, Michael, are people that are still in bargain hunting mode. People don't have the capacity to keep up this pace of spending throughout the holiday season, just because for most people their incomes have been flat, so their discretionary spending power has been squeezed. Household expenses have gone up, but holiday shopping season is kind of the one time a year where they can let it loose a little bit, and I think we saw that with the Black Friday and Cyber Monday start.
Well, that's true, and Sherry, it was Black Friday, but it really started on Thanksgiving evening for so many. Is that misleading at all? I mean, it really looks good that, people are out there and they're buying, but I mean, does it really indicate anything long term?
It's interesting, and I think retailers have done to shopping in the holiday season what Hallmark did to cards. I mean, every day is a new day. Cyber Monday and Black Friday. Right. We had 226 million people at the shopping centers, the bricks and mortar shopping centers, and also record numbers in terms of internet shopping. What was really interesting is 25% of those people were actually there by midnight before. So that's kind of funny. We were expecting most people to spend an average of $700 a piece through the holiday shopping, and we've seen about $400 a piece in spending so far. But here's an interesting factor. A lot of people who were polled, about 40% of the people, say that most of the shopping they did over the Black Friday, Cyber Monday period was for themselves. And when we look at what they were buying, a lot of them were buying necessities like linens and towels. So it may be that those folks were waiting for the sales to buy the things that they've been needing for some time. We've got over 13 million people who are still paying credit card debt from last year, so let's just hope that that smart spending follows through for the rest of the season.
Pent-up demand, but not necessarily new demand for the economy that's a real driver is the bottom line.
Right. Let's go ahead and talk about jobs and take a look at the job numbers right now. In November, the unemployment rate fell 0.4% to 8.6%. That's the lowest it's been in 2.5 years. 120,000 jobs were created. The biggest gains were in the retail field, not so surprisingly. Should we be encouraged at all by these numbers, Greg?
Well, we are seeing consistent job growth. Unfortunately, it's just not at a pace that's going to blow anybody's hair back. The reason that the unemployment rate's fallen has more to do with people that have given up looking for work than it has with people actually getting jobs. And I think 2012 will be better on that front. We'll see more job growth. We'll see it at a faster pace. But in terms of the unemployment rate, it may actually go up before it goes down further, just as discouraged people once again start looking for jobs.
Sherry, it's the chicken or the egg. Jobs or lack of them beget foreclosures, and we're told that unless we see an economic improvement, we're not going to see an improvement in the foreclosure numbers. The question to both of you, what are you seeing in South Florida? Construction, of course, all of this tied together. Give us sort of a macro view of what you're seeing of how this is playing out as we just described it.
Right. Well, the big problem, of course, goes back to those 27 million new loans that were initiated during the bubble. And so far, only about 6.5% of those have been worked through foreclosure. There's about another 8.5% of those that are still at risk. So we're really not through this. But of course, what that creates is that cycle that we call adverse feedback, which is much like a hurricane. So it builds up, the storm passes, and then it needs to dissipate. What happens is the foreclosure numbers go up, those homes eventually sell for a lot less than average homes, drives prices down, pushes more people into negative equity and into foreclosure, and that whole cycle continues that way. But you're correct that in terms of when we're going to see some appreciation, it's probably a few years off. We'll probably see another 2 or 3% at least in terms of the price decreases this year. And then when we do see appreciation, it's got to be with jobs. The problem that we had was home values went up so much quicker than income. And income and home values just have to be tied together. So until we fix the problem with employment, we're really not going to fix the problem with housing.
Are we ever going to get back to the values, before the bubble burst? Or, I mean, the people that bought high, do they just need to realize that they're just sitting in a house that's underwater, and they will for a long time.
Yeah, it will take a while. But one of the interesting things that's happening, particularly here in Florida, I mean, this is our silver lining, is we've got some micro markets around the United States, but a lot of them are in Florida. One of those is Miami, for example. Sales in Miami were up 54% last year, and we're looking thanks to foreign buyers. 70 or 80% of those deals are to foreign buyers. Most of them are cash deals, so they don't have to worry about appraisals or getting a loan. And the appreciation rates for Miami condos, we're looking at somewhere from 10 to 15% anticipated appreciation over the coming year.
Greg, as we look outbound to November of 2012, and a lot of people from the president on down to those seeking state office saying, where will the economy be? Give us a sense of what you think the headwinds or tailwinds will be that President Obama and everybody running for office, whether it's the GOP hopefuls or him, will have to deal with. People running for United States Senate, Bill Nelson trying to defend his seat against challengers. Give us your sense a year from now where we're going to be.
Well, when we talk about jobs, a lot of what's holding that back is just that there's so much uncertainty. I mean, you know, the old expression of a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does it make a sound? Well, if the economy's improving but nobody believes it, is it really improving? And, you know, the data on the economy's actually been much better over the past 4 months, but when you poll consumers, they're not feeling it. Only about 1 in 8 people actually feels more secure in their job today than they did a year ago. And that's the type of cloud that has to lift before not only are consumers more willing and able to spend, but before employers are really ready to add to payrolls in bigger numbers.
So the feel good or feel bad number next November, we just don't know where it'll be yet leading into that crucial presidential election.
We're headed in the right direction, and I expect that pace will pick up. But, you know, the timetable of that is still uncertain. Look, we've been waiting for job growth to kick into a higher gear all year long. We could be in much the same position a year from now.
And I know we were talking about, Sherry, the direct link between jobs and housing. But, you know, what can be done? Is there anything that can be done on the government level, on the federal level?
Yeah, well, obviously there have been tons, I mean, hundreds of initiatives so far.
Loosely, but have they worked? I mean,
not really.
That's
they fall into 2 buckets, really. We've got the triage type initiatives, which are those shorter term, just sort of to stop the bleeding, and those are aimed at keeping folks in their homes and the loss mitigation, stopping the defaults, stopping bad bank practices right away, keeping the money flowing. Those initiatives have been the things like the modifications under making home affordable, the HAMP modifications. When we look at the numbers, we look at the indicators, it's very clear that they haven't worked. I mean, aside from the fact that home values continue to go down, sales are still stagnant, aside from the fact that defaults continue to go up, even the modifications, 45% of the modifications that happened under those programs under the last 2 years are redefaulting, so they're not working. The other bucket of initiatives have been the reform initiatives, and those are the longer term initiatives aimed at fixing the systemic problems and punishing the bad guys. And a lot of those have been under the Dodd-Frank Act, of course, so they haven't even been written yet.
Well, let's ask. So pretend for a moment it's Christmas time, so you get your wish. You both get to go to the White House and Capitol Hill, and they say, for a minute, we're going to put aside red tape, which never happens in Washington, and we're going to put aside politics, which never happens, but pretend it did. What would be your advice to the president and to Congress people about the best, simplest, most direct way to cut through this foreclosure crisis, to get housing going again, job starts, if you didn't have to deal with the politics situation? First you, Greg, then you, Sherry.
Well, in terms of just the uncertainty altogether, I think you have to come up with a credible plan to balance the budget long term without denting the economic recovery in the short term. Not easily done, which is why it hasn't been done. If you do that, all of a sudden, that's going to help keep interest rates low and at the same time engender some confidence in the economy short term that we need to see job growth to get people back to work and spending money.
I think Fannie Mae's Lease for Deed program has been wonderful, and it needs to be scaled further. So that's a program.
What that is.
That's a program where if you're in default with a Fannie Mae loan, you can give the bank a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and you can rent your home back. I think that needs to be tweaked with an option to buy your home back again at the end of 2 or 3 years if you go through appropriate credit counseling, so you really, you know, are better able to own your home. I think we really need to look at programs that encourage positive behavior. These modification programs where people had to be in default made no sense to me to begin with. But we really need to look at reinstilling traditional home ownership. Owning your home with 100% financing is not home ownership. The goal is to build your home so that you can retire, so that our kids don't have to pay to subsidize other people's retirement. The other big problem is the income inequality. There have been for years, for 20 years, folks at the higher end have been seeing their income increase something like 275%, while folks at the lower end maybe 20%. We've hit an all-time low now in terms of the amount of wages that are paid to the workforce. It's at an all-time low. And wages are not increasing. I mean, even as people get jobs, the unemployed get jobs, 93% of them are showing that they have been significantly and permanently damaged. They don't think they'll ever recover. We've got hundreds of millions of people in the workforce in part-time jobs now. So we really need to look at not just the employment, but the jobs that people are getting then and the wages they can make.
Greg, very briefly, if the euro crashes and we continue to see problems in Europe or economies go into recession there, how bad will it be for the U.S., for workers here, for the whole picture U.S.?
That's the wild card that can derail everything. You know, all the positive momentum we have now in terms of the economy, that can all be derailed subject to what happens in Europe. I mean, think back to 2008 when credit froze. That's when the economy fell off a cliff. That's not a road we want to go down again. I don't expect that we will, but it's still a possibility.
And it's because we have so much trade with Europe and we're in a global economy. You can't say, well, I don't care about Europe. You have to care about Europe and every other part of the economy around the globe.
Exactly. And I mean, it's, you know, we need foreign investors to buy U.S. government debt. And if credit freezes, they're not going to buy U.S. government debt, which means not only can't, you know, corporations get money, but then consumers can't borrow, small businesses can't borrow. And, you know, it's like starving a fire of oxygen. That's what happens to the economy.
Well, we thank you so much for your advice and your insight into everything related to our economy, which, I mean, it's all interconnected. So it's all jobs are dependent on housing. Housing is dependent, I mean, the whole thing. It's one big
house of cards.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
We thank you for helping us with the juggling act. Well said.
Thank you very much, Sherry Olafson and Greg McBride. We appreciate your time today. Coming up next, Governor Scott's spending plan. Who's getting more than they got last year?
Now time for our roundtable with News Channel 5 political analyst and coordinator of the American Studies program at Lynn University, Dr. Robert Watson, and Brian Crowley, author of the CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. The economy, the economy, the economy. You heard our guest. Your thoughts about the economy and how it factors into the pivotal 2012 race.
Well, certainly no surprise that it's the economy. And in Florida, where unemployment still remains painfully high, despite a small downturn in the numbers, the economy is going to be huge come November. It's going to stay that way. The latest Quinnipiac poll shows that the economy remains high on the minds of voters in Florida. And, you know, I don't think we should be surprised, because even if the economy gets a little bit better over the next 6, 7, 8, 9 months, I don't think anybody expects that the economy is going to be so much better by the time we have the election that it's going to have that it's going to help Barack Obama.
Yeah, and in polls we're seeing record pessimism when the public is asked in those important questions. Do you think the economy is going to get better? Do you feel comfortable with the direction that the country's headed in? Record numbers of people are saying no. So I think that, together with the poor economy, that's going to be a deciding factor. That doesn't bode well for President Obama. It's very tough for an incumbent to get reelected when the economy's headed south instead of headed north. The challenge for the Republicans...
Or headed north, but not fast enough.
Or not fast enough. And the challenge for the Republicans, they really can't do one of those Reagan moments. Are you better off today than you were? Because then the Republicans ran this economy into the toilet as well. So, you know, it's going to be a blame game. And you know, I've been saying for quite some time now, in addition to the economy, the other key to predicting this election would be a quarter. Right there, this thing is just changing weekly, isn't it?
Let's talk about Governor Rick Scott's budget. He unveiled it, the one coming for the coming year. Let's listen to where he is placing his emphasis.
But this budget is about education. $1 billion more in state funding of education, $6,372 per student, which is the third highest on record. And I'm not signing a budget unless we have a significant increase in state funding for education, because that's what hardworking Floridians want.
Last question.
Now, the Democrats were quick to point out, even with the increase, Florida still has $300 million less than when Rick Scott took office.
Well, let's not forget, in his first budget, Governor Scott proposed a 10% cut in education. The Republican legislature brought him down to 8%. But that 8% was devastating, especially for an educational system that was already weak to begin with. I think the governor discovered a few things. Number one, he discovered that you can't cut education for a weak system and it gets a whole lot better. Two, his poll numbers have gone south. Three, it was supposed to be an administration all about jobs. Cutting education is not helping to create jobs. And we've all realized the painful way that the linkage between jobs and education is there to create the right type of high-tech, skilled jobs to attract employers to Florida that you need to attract. We need a quality, world-class educational system.
But, Brian, his numbers don't include more money for higher education to that point. At least initially, lawmakers will play with this outline. And, of course, it talks about cuts to Medicaid and other programs. So you're going to have the have-not situation yet again that the governor's going to have to cope with.
Well, as always is true whenever you get the governor's budget, you have to look at the fine print. And we haven't seen the fine print on these numbers yet, but Robert is right. There have been significant cuts over the years. This proposal will close some of that gap. It's also interesting that he said that he would veto the budget if he didn't get a significant increase. So he didn't say he had to have his $1 billion. We don't know yet what his definition is of a significant increase. Sure. You know, I'm on the Budget Review Committee for the Palm Beach County School Board. We had our first meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking at a $52 million cut in Palm Beach County schools. That's a lot of money to try to cut, and I'm sure the school district will be looking closely at this proposal to see whether or not they can recover some of that $52 million.
And a lot of voters he has to listen to.
Sure, I mean, his poll numbers have gone down. When the governor says he'll veto this, I believe him. This is a governor who has wielded that veto pen pretty aggressively, but Kelly, you're right. Even with the $1 billion injection, we're still down, and property taxes are down for local funding.
Right.
So we're still probably not where we need to be.
On we go. Well, coming up next, I bet you can't possibly guess who we'll be talking about. A famous part-time Palm Beacher who's making political news again. We're back in a moment.
Just when you thought Donald Trump was out of the presidential politics picture, he got himself back in. The newest Republican frontrunner, Newt Gingrich, met with him this week. 2 questions for our panelists. Why do so many of the Republican candidates meet with Donald Trump? And what do you make of the proposal for Trump to moderate a debate with the Republican candidates?
Well, I think even the Republican candidates recognize that Donald Trump is a sideshow. And the fact of the matter is that we're to blame for the reason that these guys show up to see Donald Trump, because who else shows up? Every camera within 100 miles shows up to follow anybody who meets with Donald Trump. And it becomes, you know, free media, a free show. I think it's silly and goofy. I don't take Donald Trump seriously, but...
How important is his support to these guys? You've got at least several, including Newt Gingrich, to say they'll show up December 27th. Romney says he won't. Is Trump a kingmaker or a little kingmaker?
In his own mind, he's a kingmaker. He said such irresponsible comments as, my endorsement will be the deciding factor next year. Of course, someone who moderates a debate should never endorse. He's gone on to say that the reason he should be hosting this is because he has high ratings on The Apprentice. I think we're reaching a new low. Where's the dignity and integrity of the presidency?
Which Ron Paul said in saying that he wouldn't go to the debate.
Ron Paul and John Huntsman showed integrity and courage by saying absolutely no. And you know what? Where are we going next? I think in January, Kim Kardashian will be hosting a next Republican debate. And I got the perfect location, the Jersey Shore. We could do it in one of Trump's casinos. I mean, I think one thing that could come out of this, we saw some craziness in presidential debates. And in 1988, we created the Commission on Presidential Debates to set guidelines. We've had good quality presidential debates with good moderation and questions since then. They've picked the right locations for debates like Lynn University. What I think we might see happening, there could be a move to create a similar type of commission for the primary debates.
Do you know anybody who teaches at Lynn?
Yeah, I do. You seem very big on this Lynn presidential debate.
Heck of an American Studies program.
Now,
we like that guy.
Gingrich's poll numbers are up in Florida. That doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump, does it?
No. And in a
Quinnipiac
poll that came out last Thursday, the 509 registered Republicans with a 4.3 margin of error. Gingrich is at 35%, and Romney is at 22%. That's pretty significant. Now, they're not likely Republican. They just polled registered Republican voters, but I still think that gap is likely. Another interesting number, if I may, is that 15% of the people that were polled in this group identified themselves as Tea Party voters. And I think those folks are going to be the ones who show up on January 31st for the presidential primary here.
So do you think that will trump, no pun intended, Romney's better organization and better money in Florida as you look at it right now, Robert?
It could. You know, there's no substitute for a good ground game, and Romney's the only one that has anything like a ground game. But here's the X factor. There's very few debates left despite the Trump circus, and people don't pay attention over the holiday season. January 3rd, we're into Iowa, then we have New Hampshire, South Carolina, Florida. So if it's possible that Newt could retain this double-digit margin of leadership, and if he wins 2 or 3 of those early primaries and caucuses, he could have the big momentum. So Romney is in trouble right now. Romney's also in trouble, I think, one other quick reason. Gingrich has emerged as the anti-Romney. Romney, I think, is realizing he played this sort of faulty Giuliani strategy from 2008. He assumed he would be the default candidate. We tire of Bachmann, we tire of Kane, he'd be the default candidate. He's been too safe. Newt has been everywhere. And it turned out Romney's run out of time and didn't predict Newt rising like this.
All right, we'll be back to wrap it up in just a moment.
What would Christmas season be without
A Crowley closer?
Right,
well, as we
ad-libbing.
well, this morning we begin. We start off. We're going to be 7 weeks away from the Florida primary. It's hard to believe after a year of watching this campaign, and there hasn't been a lot of it right here in Florida yet. But I think over the next 7 weeks, especially after we get past the holidays, we're going to start seeing a lot of action here in the Sunshine State. And I'd like to get out of Iowa and New Hampshire and spend some time in the Sunshine State in January myself.
So I'll be coming down.
I think we'll see a lot of action in the weeks ahead, and people should watch this program to learn more.
Thanks, gentlemen, and thank you for spending time with us on today's To The Point.
Have a great Sunday. Bye-bye.